Imagine being the man who saved a revolution. Not once, but 3 times. And then watching history erase every bit of it the moment you make one terrible choice. That is exactly what happened to Benedict Arnold. On a quiet September morning in 1780, George Washington rode toward the fort at West Point, expecting a friendly breakfast with a general he trusted more than almost anyone else in his army. Instead, he found empty rooms, damning papers, and a betrayal so complete it nearly cost America the war. The man who orchestrated it had once been called the most fearless officer in the entire Continental Army. Today, his name means only one thing in America: traitor. But almost nobody remembers what he did before that morning. And that missing piece changes everything.
14 years earlier, Arnold was just a merchant running a small trading business out of New Haven, Connecticut, selling books and medicine along the coast. He had grown up watching his father drink away the family's money and reputation until there was nothing left, and he carried that shame like a wound that never closed. 2 of his siblings died young. His mother died when he was 18, and his father followed only 2 years later, leaving him with nothing but a desperate need to become someone. He clawed his way into business, built a small fortune through trade routes to the Caribbean, and became known as a man who did not back down from anyone. When the shots rang out at Lexington and Concord in 1775, Arnold did not wait for permission. He grabbed his militia and marched straight into a war that would define and eventually destroy his entire life.
What happened next revealed something nobody expected: a natural gift for war that bordered on genius. Arnold convinced Massachusetts to let him lead an attack on Fort Ticonderoga, a British stronghold packed with cannons the colonies desperately needed. He and Ethan Allen seized it together in a surprise raid, and those very cannons were later dragged all the way to Boston, forcing the British to abandon the city entirely. It should have made Arnold a hero. Instead, political rivals stripped him of credit and quietly revoked his command. This pattern, brilliant success followed by public humiliation, would repeat itself again and again throughout his career, each time cutting a little deeper into the man underneath the uniform.
Instead of walking away, Arnold pushed forward with an even bolder plan, leading nearly 1,000 men through the brutal wilderness of Maine to attack Quebec. The journey turned into one of the most punishing marches in American military history, through freezing rain, disease, and starvation so severe that soldiers ate candles and boiled shoe leather just to survive. Arnold refused every comfort his rank could have granted him, marching and starving alongside his men instead of ahead of them. When they finally reached Quebec and launched their attack during a blinding snowstorm, a musket ball tore through his leg, and he had to be carried from the battlefield, still shouting orders. The assault failed, but something more important happened in those frozen woods. His soldiers began to worship him, because he had proven he would suffer everything they suffered and never once ask for special treatment.
A year later, Arnold pulled off what many historians now consider one of the most underrated achievements of the entire Revolutionary War. The British were preparing to sail a massive invasion fleet down Lake Champlain to cut the American colonies in half, and Arnold, despite having almost no naval experience, was ordered to stop them. In just a few weeks, he built a scrappy fleet of gunboats from green timber, personally overseeing every hull and cannon placement himself. When the British fleet finally came, Arnold ambushed them from behind a small island, and even though his ships were eventually destroyed one by one, The battle delayed the British invasion by an entire year. That single year gave the Americans time to regroup, recruit, and prepare for a fight that would change the course of the war. For saving the northern colonies from being split apart, Congress rewarded Arnold with nothing, promoting 5 less experienced officers over his head just months later.
Then came Saratoga, the battle historians call the true turning point of the American Revolution, and once again, Arnold was at the center of it. His commanding officer, a cautious man named Horatio Gates, stripped Arnold of his command mid-battle out of jealousy and pure spite. So when the second phase of the fight began, Arnold did something almost unheard of in military history. He mounted his horse without orders and rode straight into the chaos anyway. Soldiers later said he fought like a man who no longer cared whether he lived, charging fortified positions and rallying broken lines through sheer force of will alone. A soldier shot his horse out from under him during the final assault, and the animal collapsed directly onto his already wounded leg, shattering it beyond repair. 10 days later, the entire British army surrendered at Saratoga, a victory that convinced France to join the war, and the man most responsible for it was lying in a hospital bed while his rival took every ounce of the credit.
That injury never truly healed, and neither did the resentment building underneath it. Arnold's leg ended up 2 inches shorter than the other, leaving him with a permanent limp and constant pain for the rest of his life. While recovering, Congress finally promoted him to Major General, but refused to restore the seniority he had earned, a half apology that felt more like another insult. When he was later put in charge of Philadelphia, he fell into the city's wealthy loyalist social circles, spent money he did not have, and eventually faced a court-martial over accusations of corruption. Washington delivered only a gentle, formal reprimand. But for a man who had bled for his country twice and buried his pride again and again, even a mild scolding felt like the final straw. Around this same time, he married 18-year-old Peggy Shippen, a young woman from a prominent loyalist family who, historians now confirm, was far more involved in what came next than anyone once believed.
Within weeks of the wedding, Arnold began secretly communicating with Peggy's old friend, a young officer named John Andre, using code names, invisible ink, and a private cipher hidden inside an ordinary book. He offered military secrets in exchange for money and eventually maneuvered himself into command of West Point, the single most important fort in all of North America. Once in control, he quietly sabotaged it from the inside, thinning the garrison, delaying repairs, and even selling off his own soldiers' food supplies for personal profit. Every decision looked like ordinary military mismanagement on the surface, but each one was carefully designed to make the fort collapse the moment the British finally attacked. If the plan had worked, historians believe the war could have effectively ended right there, cutting off the colonies and crushing what remained of the rebellion's momentum. The entire plot unraveled because of pure chance. 3 militiamen stopped a suspicious traveler near Tarrytown, New York, and found detailed plans of West Point's defenses hidden inside his boots. That man was Major John Andre, and despite offering the soldiers gold and promises of enormous wealth, they refused every bribe and turned him in. Arnold learned of the capture just minutes before Washington himself arrived for a routine inspection, and he fled down the river to a waiting British ship with barely any time to spare. When Washington discovered what had happened, he reportedly said only one haunting sentence: "Whom can we trust now?" Andre was hanged as a spy days later, mourned even by many Americans as an honorable man caught inside someone else's betrayal, while Arnold spent the rest of his life scorned by both sides, never fully trusted by the very British he had sold everything to join.
What makes this story so uncomfortable
is not that Arnold was a villain. That part is easy to accept. It is that the record clearly shows a man who nearly died twice for a cause he genuinely believed in, who spent his own money keeping his soldiers fed, and who was repaid over and over with jealousy, public humiliation, and empty promises. None of that excuses what he ultimately did, and the damage he caused was real and lasting. But it forces an uncomfortable question that history rarely likes to sit with. What does a country actually owe the people who sacrifice everything for it and receive nothing back in return? At Saratoga today, there stands a strange monument, a single stone boot honoring the leg he shattered in his greatest moment of heroism, with no name attached to it at all. A hero's contribution remembered forever, while the man himself was erased completely.